Hi everyone, good evening to you all. We're just going to give it a couple of minutes just to let a few people join in. We're just letting a few people in now, so we'll give it a few minutes and then we'll begin. Brilliant. It actually looks like we've got everyone joined now. So a big thank you for taking the time to jump on tonight. I know you guys have probably got enough going on at the minute. So yeah, thank you very much for your time. We've put this webinar on tonight just as a lot of people was asking, could they hear a little bit more from the team in terms of nutrition, how they can sort of look into winter management and that sort of thing. So we've got a brilliant panelist here tonight. So we've got Hannah Batty from LM Vets, who's going to go into about winter health management, looking into ventilation in sheds and a bit further. We've got Sean Roddy, so part of the Gamechanger team, who also holds a nutrition background. So Sean's going to be going into a little bit about the transitioning phase, the importance of getting your silage right and looking into silage analysis, that sort of element. And then we also have Beth Cambridge from AgriWebb on here as well, who's going to give you a bit of an update on where we're up to with AgriWebb and how you can utilise the different features with managing your forage or any treatments as well. So I'll pass over to Hannah first, where she's going to do her little bit.
Thanks very much, Isla. Hello, everybody. I can't see you. I wish I could. It'd be nice to see everyone's faces. But like Isla said, thanks for coming on this evening. So I get the pleasure of looking after the calves and supporting the rearers when all the calves come to us, obviously from a variety of different units. We want to do our best to set them up for success for you. And Isla said, actually, can we have a little bit of a chat about how we manage things during this time of year? You'll know as well as I do. As you can see, I've still got my fleece on from earlier, from being out and about today on farm. But tomorrow I'm looking at it and it's going to be 13 degrees. So within the space of 24 hours, we've got a 10-degree temperature fluctuation. So if we just click on to the next slide, if that's all right. Oh, and the one after that. Perfect. The fluctuating temperatures that are going on at the minute can be an absolute nightmare. We also have housing to consider. You know, sometimes these animals that you're looking after might have been out grazing and now we're bringing them all in. So I often think that's a little bit like sending all our kids to nursery at the same time, all that mixing under one roof. You know, you think of the time of COVID when actually we didn't mingle in that way and respiratory infections, you know, other than the COVID infection we were all looking out for, were reduced. Dark, damp days. This is probably everybody's worst nightmare. I know it is for me, but it also is for our cattle. And also, we have that increased infection pressure that we need to think about. So, I thought I'd chat a little bit. We know the risks, but maybe a few things for you to consider on your own units about how to manage these and to mitigate them. So, if we click on to the next slide. So, environmental considerations. For me, there's three things that everybody should be looking at in terms of are they providing the best environment for the cattle that they look after? Moisture. Now, moisture is an absolute pleasure ground for our bacteria. It promotes growth. They absolutely love that. But in addition to that, it helps them move around, you know, spreading from pen to pen. Moisture absorbs energy as well. Actually, it's not as pleasant an environment to be in when we've got too much moisture, and it increases our LCT, so our lower critical temperature. So what does that mean? It means our animals are having to use more energy to keep themselves warm because actually they start having to cope with this dampness that if you imagine it yourself, me on a nice, cold, brisk, dry day, I'm generally a lot warmer than when I'm stood outside in a really soggy coat, getting really wet and damp. So, moisture is a real thing that we need to kind of keep a good control of and manage as well as we can. So, the next thing we come on to is airspeed. So, when we're thinking about airspeed, we've got to really find the perfect sweet spot. If we have too little, we're going to have a lack of fresh air, and that brings us on to further issues that I'll come on to in a second. But if we have too much, we're going to get energy loss. We can also get a bit of a risk of immunosuppression because ultimately, again, too fast in our lower critical temperature, so that temperature where we start having to use up energy to keep ourselves warm is going to increase again. And then finally, we move on to a lack of fresh air. Fresh air is absolutely brilliant at killing bacteria. So our clean air can kill bacteria and viruses 10 to 20 times faster than if we only have 50% clean air. Therefore, if we don't have enough of it, what are we going to get? We're going to get an increase in the survival time of pathogens, those pesky bacteria and viruses that really are playing a huge role in pneumonia, one of our biggest challenges, and it can also reduce oxygen concentrations. So for me, the three things we need to be thinking about are the moisture in our sheds, the air speed, have we got that at the sweet spot? The sweet spot being a maximum of 2 meters per second, or have we also got enough fresh air coming in? So if we move on to the next slide, some things that might give you a little clue in your own shed that things aren't quite ideal would be the following. So cobwebs, have we got cobwebs? This suggests that maybe we've got areas of the shed where airflow isn't at an optimum. The classic snotty noses, you'll see this yourself on multiple occasions. Further down we can see here, and I apologise, I know it is a dairy cow, but we can see here a leaking water trough. Actually, are we just creating some extra moisture in that shed that we could be avoiding? Moving on, we also might have areas of drainage that aren't optimum. Have we got pooling areas? If so, where are they and why might they be happening? Or are we seeing an increase in things like antimicrobial usage? So all of these things might tell us that actually things aren't quite where we want them to be. So moving on, thinking about this shed, and I'm sure most of you will have seen this picture time and time again, but what are we trying to achieve? Well, ultimately, we're trying to achieve and work with natural ventilation as well as we can. So what you can see here, we've got our animals in the middle of the shed. They're going to kick out some warm air from their body. This heat is going to rise up to the top, hopefully carrying that dirty air, those pathogens, and go out the hole in the roof and out the way. At the same time as this, due to convection, we're going to be drawing in that clean air from the sides of the building, bringing in fresh air that's going to help reduce our pathogen load and really create the ideal environment for our animals to flourish in. So moving on, how do we achieve that? Well, actually, we've talked about the bit at the top. So our outlet at the very top, that's going to be to remove the heat and the moisture from our shed. So we need that to be as open as possible and ideally. So a good rule of thumb is we need 0.1 meter squared per animal. If we don't get that, if our air is sitting there at the very top, we're going to get still and damp airflow. And again, that's going to increase our chance of pneumonia. When we look at our inlets, so these are the bits on the side of the building that I mentioned to you. This is going to draw our clean air in, but we have to again strike that fine balance because we want to make sure the sides of the building that we're still reducing wind speed at an animal level. So we're not exceeding that 2 meters per second I mentioned, and we're bringing in that fresh air. So a good rule of thumb, like I said, our outlet needs to be 0.1 meters squared per animal, and I'll show you a really useful resource to help calculate your own in a few slides. And our inlet needs to be at least twice the size of that outlet, ideally maybe even 4 times the size. And another thing for us to think about is if we look at the sides of this building, we can see these big open sides, which are great. Actually, we're going to get lots of nice fresh air in there. We know that our inlet is good, but we just need to make sure we are mindful of what that does with wind speed. You know, hopefully as we get into those larger animals, we can mitigate that and it's actually not too much of an issue, but it's just, again, striking that fine balance between fresh air and not too much wind speed at an animal level. So clicking on to the next slide, let's have a little bit of a chat about ridges. I never thought I would find ridges as interesting as I do now, but if there is one thing I would encourage each and every one of you to do when you get home is really critique the ridge of your roof. So obviously we've got in the top there, just underneath the slide title, we've got a nice open ridge. In many ways, this is great because all of that dirty air can get out. But as I'm sure we all know, if it's too big, often we can get issues with things like rainwater coming in. And what's that going to do? Well, if it's landing on our bedding, it's going to increase the moisture in the shed. So looking at the picture below, it might be that actually, why don't we cover that ridge so we've not got too much of an issue? But actually, a cranked ridge, such as the one in this picture, is only going to give us about 20% of the required outlet that we need. So what's going to happen is all that dirty air, all that heat is going to rise, hit the roof, then it's got nowhere to go. So we're effectively just going to be recirculating our dirty air, and all those bugs are going to get a chance to drop down at an animal level again and cause us some risk for pneumonia. So what's the win-win situation? So we would move to this picture on the side, which is actually an open ridge, but it's elevated and covered. So actually our dirty air can still rise and get out of that shed. Other things that people might have or might have considered are we've now got kind of roofs where we've got they're kind of not aligned, not sat right next to each other. So the roof, there's little gaps in between all the roof slats, which again does contribute to our outlet. There's a little bit on here about how to calculate what you're achieving with your outlet. So like I said, I'll show you that resource. It is epic and very, very handy. So if we move on to the next slide, I thought it might be useful just to spend a couple of seconds just having a nosy at this picture, have a little think about what you think some of the challenges might be, and they're numbered here to make it a bit simpler. Anybody want to pop anything in the chat? Anyone brave enough to pop anything in the chat? At the minute, we're a no. So, with that in mind, I'll give you some of the clues. So, when I look at this shed, actually, there's a few things I quite like. I'm going to be honest. It's nice and bright. It looks easy to see what's going on in there. But yes, woo! Okay, we've got some answers there. Well done, guys. And yeah, absolute gold star from everybody there. Ridge not open enough. We've got an insufficient roof outlet in this picture. Straight off the bat, we know that that air is going to rise to the top and actually is going to come back down. So we've got small inlets as a bit of a comment. Yeah, actually looking at this, I'm not 100% sure what the inlet is. Over at picture number 2, we can see that whilst there is a door, we potentially might have some challenges with that being a bit drafty. It's not a consistent inlet throughout the shed, allowing lots of small bits of air in. It'll be good for getting some in, but actually we might have a bit too much of a wind speed. Within this shed, I suspect, and kind of number 3, if you like, will probably get this point across. But I suspect, depending on which pen you are in, will depend on what temperature and what wind speed you are exposed to. There's quite a lot of variation within this shed, which means we're going to get inconsistent environment. And yeah, gold star to Luke for spotting number 4 there, mixed ages. We've got quite a big mixed group size here. So again, we've got those younger animals that are going to be slightly more challenged by those older animals, not just from a competition for feed kind of thing, but also the pathogens they might have been exposed to. So our challenges in here to summarize, number 1, everyone spotted it. Great, the insufficient roof outlet. Number 2, we've got a bit of a drafty door that might mean some wind, but actually is our inlet big enough all over? We need to calculate that number. Number 3, we can see that we've got a bit of variation in wind speed and temperature depending on whereabouts in the shed you are. And number 4, we've got a mixed group size. Brilliant. Thank you for interacting with that. I appreciate webinars can sometimes be interesting and a bit tricky. So I really do appreciate you all having a go at answering those questions. So if we move on to the next slide, we can see the easy wins. Well, for me, I wish I could give each of you 300 grand tonight. That would be my dream, to build a nice shiny new shed that is literally built and fit for purpose. But ultimately, we want some simple things we can do now that will create real change. First and foremost, bedding. This is going to be massively beneficial. Keep it nice and dry. We already know that if we have more moisture, it's going to be the perfect bacterial ground. So plenty of clean, fresh bedding. And I really like the mantra of little and often. You'll know yourself, actually chucking in a load when it gets really bad isn't as good as constant fresh increases. Number 2, check your water troughs. There is no point in us creating extra moisture in this shed by things like leaky water troughs. We want to be doing everything we can to try and keep our pathogen load as low as possible and our moisture as low as possible. Making sure that we've got plenty of space available is key as well. So I think that was my reason for the other picture there at the bottom. And finally, a little bit of TLC outside the shed. Things like guttering. Have we got leaky bits of the building? Have we got water dripping in where it shouldn't? Have we cleaned those gutters out? Anything we can do to reduce moisture buildup in that shed is going to be ideal. So clicking on to the next slide. Where do you think you're most likely to pick up the flu during the Christmas period heading to the bar? Are we going for the top or the bottom picture? What are we all thinking? If anybody wants to pop it in the chat, that would be great again. Oh, yes, thank you. Amazing. So, yeah, so as we can tell, it's that top picture. And my point here is that the solution to pollution is dilution. Now, any environmentalists who are on the webinar tonight might not like that, but the point I'm trying to make is stocking rates really, really do matter. And I appreciate the fact that we are trying to be efficient and profitable businesses, but making sure that we aren't pushing that shed too far to the extreme and actually putting it under too much pressure will have a massive impact on the health of those animals. Yeah, Sean, top is overcrowded. So, a few numbers for you to think about. So, red tractor standards, if we're thinking about a 200 kilogram calf, we want a minimum of 3 meters squared. In all of the wean sheds on the rearing units, we operate on a minimum space of 3 meters squared as well. And as soon as we're getting up to 600 kilos, the key number there for red tractor is 6.8 meters squared. I would argue if you are having any of those warning signs that we talked about, that again, maybe consider stocking that shed ever so slightly lower. It might be that, during 2 months of the year, you just can't really have it because you're having those still dank days depending on your location. So again, the solution to pollution is dilution. If you're having loads of challenges with health, actually think about whether you're just putting that shed under a little bit too much pressure. So flicking on another slide. How can you assess your housing and what tools should you use? I cannot rate this resource highly enough. The AHDB Better Cattle Housing Design resource is absolutely phenomenal. What it does is it talks you through all these calculations that we think about. It tells you how good the ventilation is. It's something you can do in conjunction with your own vets or even just on your own, get your tape measure out, sit around the table. And if you don't have a tape measure big enough, work it out based on feet. How many bays is it and multiply it up afterwards. It can give you a really useful indicator of how your shed is performing or what it is capable of doing, should I say. And for me, it's a really simple thing that is absolutely free. This resource is superb. So I'd encourage each and every one of you, have a nosy at that and maybe look at your own shed design or even ask your mate what they're doing and how their performance is. So clicking on, this is short and sweet this evening. Oh, there we go. I cannot come on here as a vet and not talk to you about the role of vaccination. However, a vaccine is not a silver bullet. We know that it is a careful balance of immunity versus challenge whenever we're thinking about diseases like pneumonia. Vaccines can certainly help, but if the challenge just overwhelms it, it's not going to serve, it's not going to operate, it's not going to work as well as we would hope it to. One of the positive things, so this is a slide I took from AHDB, we can actually see that the total number of animals that are vaccinated for pneumonia now is consistently rising. There is a lot of funding out there for sampling, so your local vet, if they work well with the pharmaceutical companies, will have funding that enables you to find out what pathogens are truly playing a role on your farm. If you are going to use vaccines, making sure you store them right, administer right, and give them to animals at the best possible time should see you getting the best possible efficacy from them. So a really quick summary, the key things to remember if you're thinking about your housing and how to set things up as well as possible during the winter period. So the final slide is you want to maximise fresh air, making sure we're getting plenty of fresh air to reduce bacterial load. Moisture management, make sure your shed is set up to keep as much moisture out, but also that you're not creating moisture within it from things like unnecessary leaky water troughs. Stocking rate is a simple thing. The solution to pollution is dilution. And think about those easy wins that you might be able to do tomorrow. I'd love it if each and every one of you had a quick look at your shed and worked out, what your outlet truly was, or whether there was something, some leaky water pipe or a drain that needed unblocking that could benefit things. If you've got any queries or questions, pop them in the chat. We've got some question time at the end, but thank you very much for listening.
Okay, everyone. Hello. My name's Sean Ruddy. I think if there's anyone on here that I may have spoken to in the past, so some of you might be sick of hearing from me, others it might be your first time listening to me talk. But we're kind of going to run through and follow on from what Hannah has already spoken about. Really looking at the nutrition and diet side of things and how to keep these animals healthy and performing. So if we move on to our first slide, anyone who knows me knows that I talk an awful lot about the 3 pillars to maintaining animal performance and how you should only ever change one of those at a time. So you've got the animal social group, that is the group it interacts with and lives with, the diet it's on, and the environment it lives in. When we're looking at changing 3 pillars and having an impact on the animal, it is all around stress. So if we can minimize stress and minimize the impact of stressful periods of time on that animal, we can maximize the health, maximize intakes, and maximize performance. So one of our most stressful periods of time on farm, and a time on farm that I see us having the most issues within Gamechanger, is that initial period of time when calves first arrive on farm, from the rearing unit onto the grower or finisher farm. This is an extremely stressful period of time, both because it is a change in the environment and they're going to have the stress of haulage. So calves are going to arrive at a rear in their social group. They're going to be on a 16% rear nut and ad lib straw. So we want to try and maintain as much of that as possible. And bear in mind that we're changing the environment. We are not going to change their social group or their diet. So if you click on to the next slide, we're looking at the transition management. So as I say, calves will come off rear on ad lib 16% rear nut with access to clean straw in a feeder. I had originally wrote access to clean straw, and then I realized that on a lot of farms I do tend to have to stipulate that clean straw must be in a feeder. Bedding does not count. They might nibble at the straw bedding when you first put it in, but after about an hour, the smell of the bedding and urine from underneath will start to come through, and they will not eat that straw anymore. So clean straw in a feeder is an absolute must. Your transition period is typically going to look to be between 4 to 6 weeks. That's going to be depending on your forage quality, partly maybe a little bit depending on time of the year, and what forages you've got available on farm. So the first 12 to 14 days on farm, really we're looking to maintain the level of feeding they've come on the rearing unit. That it generally takes an animal 12 to 14 days to adjust to a change in its diet or a change in its environment. With them arriving on farm, coming off the rearing unit, spending some time in a lorry, that's a stressor. So we're not going to change their diet on that point. We're going to let them settle in, get used to the environment they're living on, and allow them to get their intakes up. What we want to try and do is make sure that if an animal is going to come under any stress, come under any environmental pressures that might impact its health, that we want them to give them the ability to eat their way through it. Energy will drive their immune system, and getting them to maintain their intakes as high as possible and keep driving it forward will get them to eat their way through it. So after about 12 or 14 days on farm, we then look to start to introduce your homegrown forages, whether it's your silage, whatever forage you've got on farm, or your TMR, while still maintaining feeding the rear or nuts. And then after a month on farm, you're looking at reducing down the feeding levels on the nuts, depending on what your feeding system is. Some farmers, it will just be grass silage topped with nuts, so you'll just be setting it out based off what your feed rate will be. Others will be on a TMR system, and the animals will be looking to move fully onto a TMR. But it's very important that we don't rush animals through this transition period onto farm. We take our time. It has a double impact in that it will help them benefit, it'll help them combat any stressors they come on, but equally, this is the animal's most efficient time in terms of feed efficiency. These animals will typically convert and feed at 6 to 7 kilos of dry matter for every kilo of live weight gain produced. If you try and save feed at this point, you're only going to spend that money at the other end, trying to put weight gain on when they're much, much more inefficient. Once they get over that 14 or 15 months of age, you're going to be looking at least double the amount of feed for every kilo of live weight gain a day. So a kilo of live weight gain during this period and when they're young is worth an awful lot more to you than a kilo of live weight gain or a higher daily live weight gain during the last 6 months on farm. It's very important you get this bit right at the very start. So move on to the next slide. What you're typically looking at is animals will have an intake of anywhere between 2 to 2.4% of their body weight. We're wanting to try and drive that as close to the 2.4% as possible. to try and make sure that they're getting as much energy into them as possible. Now, when the calves arrive off rear, they will have a fully developed rumen. They will have been on their starchy rear nut. The papillae and the rumen will be functioning and they will be digesting fiber, but they'll have never come across a grass silage before or grazed grass or anything like that. So we need to give the rumen time for the microbes in that rumen to develop and grow. But we also have to bear in mind that those calves are still quite young, still quite small, and have limited capacity. So we're expecting a calf to consume 5 or 6 kilos of nuts a day at 13 ME, and then we want them to consume the same amount of energy, but off a silage that's only 10 ME. They're physically not going to be able to fit all of that in them in that initial period. So we have to allow them to grow and allow them to gain that capacity to actually be able to consume the amount of forage we want them to do. So all this is about just giving them time, transition them nice and slowly, and a stable diet with small changes is crucial to maximizing their intakes. We move on to the next slide then. We've got a little bit on sort of assessing forage quality. So the next few slides are just going to be some of the silage analysis that I've seen this year on Gamechanger farms. So these are all real farmer analysis, and some of the typical things will come on farm. So what we tend to see an awful lot of is high dry matter silages. This year, we've had a very dry summer, and this is just some of the challenges that these silages can present. So you'll have your average protein silages of around 11 to 13% crude protein, and then you can have your low proteins that can be anywhere from 7 to 9% crude protein. They tend to be very, very high dry matter, and generally more often than not, when a farmer presents me an analysis like this or a silage like this, they'll usually tell me, I've made some really nice haylage, which is not something I always like to hear, because originally haylage was designed for feeding horses and it was designed to keep weight off horses. So having a forage for growing beef cattle that is designed to keep weight off other animals doesn't really make sense to have if it's something that we're trying to actually put weight on. So just bear that in mind when you're making your silage. It's not all about dry matter, and we'll go sort of work through some of these analysis to try and give you an understanding that high dry matter isn't everything. So you'll see on this, you've got your crucial things to look at is your crude protein, your ME. So with a high dry matter silage, you've typically got a low energy, so a low ME, both 9.3s. Again, energy is crucial. We're trying to drive energy intake. So getting that energy as high as possible in your forage is very important. Another one to look at is your NDF levels. They're both similarly quite high. And then right down the bottom on both slides, you've got something called an intake factor. This is a very useful figure to look at because basically this is calculating out based off your dry matter, your NDF levels, your energy levels, your sugar levels. It works out how much of this silage, if I put it in front of them ad lib, do these cattle want to eat? Ideally, we're looking for a minimum of 100% because that means if you put 10 kilos of your silage in front of the cows or the cattle, they'll want to eat 10 kilos. If it is below 100%, that means if you put 10 kilos in front of them, such as your low protein, high dry matter silage here in front of you, you put 10 kilos of that in front of them, they're actually only going to want to eat 8.3 kilos of it. So we're limiting intake. That therefore then is limiting energy. So trying to get the optimum silage is very, very important. If we go on to the next slide, then this is a few other silages I've seen. These are on the other end of the spectrum. So we've got our average sort of protein with a low dry matter. So we're seeing a 23% dry matter silage with a 13 protein. Again, you can see slightly higher energy, lower sugars than the other two. What you will see typically with really dry silages, I should have mentioned, is that you will actually see quite high sugars. This is usually a case of there's not enough moisture in the forage for fermentation to take place. So lactic acid is never created. So you have a low lactic acid, but you then have a hell of a lot of sugar knocking around in it. So we do want sugar in our silage and we want to see sugar in our analysis. But we don't want to see too much because that can be an indicator of poor fermentation and that means that your silage is likely to start going off quickly at the feed fence or in the pit at the pit face. So again, you can sort of see here intake factors on your low dry matter silage is down at 78. This is creating a whole other challenge where your dry silage is almost like trying to eat 3 dry Weetabix. If you put a bit of milk on your dry Weetabix, you'll eat the 3 quite comfortably. But this is the other side of things. This is where, well, you're asking me to gain weight while only drinking soup. So having a low dry matter doesn't necessarily guarantee intakes because all the energy is in the dry matter side of it. So yeah, Matthew, if your intake is over 100, that is fantastic. So that means that basically you're going to be driving intakes on those animals. So you'll often see intake potentials at 120. So that means that those animals will want to eat more, which means we're driving more energy into those animals all the time. And that's a really good indicator that palatability is really high. So yeah, no, really good question. You'll see your low protein, low dry matter silage. This silage does present quite a few challenges. You can see it's got quite high ammonia levels in it. So fermentation probably hasn't been that good. Protein is low, energy is low. So again, we've probably had a lot of losses. Your sugars are very, very low. So that'll be a sign that we've had a hell of a lot of runoff of this silage. And we're probably going to have quite a butyric, acidic silage that's not going to be overly palatable. So if you're putting this silage in front of young calves, it's going to present a lot of challenges to them. So if we move on to our next silage analysis, then we're looking a little bit more around our sort of ideal dry matters. So your ideal dry matter is anywhere from 28 to 35% dry matter. Again, we're seeing a lot of low protein silages around the country, particularly on our beef farms. This is maybe a sign the silage is being left to mature for too long. Equally, slightly a sign that maybe fertilizer rates haven't been high enough to really drive grass growth on, and we're having plants hit stem far sooner than they should be. So, you know, your nitrogen rate, it will drive up your N levels if you're cutting your silages your ammonia levels if you're cutting your grass too soon, but equally it will drive on the proportion of leaf in your sward as well. So it is important that we're feeding the plant all the time to get the optimum quality. And then you've got a little bit on your sort of target analysis. This is just a silage I pulled out from someone's diet I was doing. What you'll see in a couple of analyses that I've got, or diets that I've got, this diet makes feeding very simple. This silage makes feeding very simple. 34% dry matter. It is 15% protein, which is probably right up there in terms of the proteins that you'll typically see on farm. Anything 12 to 14 is a pretty decent protein level. And then your ME of 10.9, so almost 11 ME. So you're not going to need an awful lot of energy with this silage to really drive performance. Annoyingly, this analysis didn't come with an intake factor on it. What you can see is between the NDF levels is 44.5 compared to your other dry matter, which is 55. Your lower NDF would indicate a lot more leaf, a lot more energy. So looking at the figures that are there, this silage would comfortably be 110 to 120 on the intake factor scale. If you move on to your next slide, so hopefully this comes through quite clear, but this is just a diet check report that I will do for farmers if I'm doing their diets. And I've sort of used it as how I would formulate these diets. So within Gamechanger, we're always aiming for that kilo of live weight gain a day. So to get these cattle to do a kilo of live weight gain a day on these silages, how much did they need to eat? And what do we need to put alongside it? So kept it quite simple. We've got rolled barley, distiller's grains of a maize variety this time, beef minerals, some straw, water if needed, and the different grass silages available. So you can see your average protein high dry matter silage we can comfortably achieve a kilo of live weight gain a day off this if we can drive intakes and get everything right. This is going to cost £1.60 a day. So it's a pretty expensive diet for a 400 kilo animal. And at a kilo a day, it's obviously costing you 160 per kilo live weight gain. We're feeding 2.5 kilos of barley and 2 kilos of wheat distillers, so 4.5 kilos of purchase feed in total. And we're also having to add in about 6 kilos of water. If this was a TMR, we'd be adding water in to try and stick everything together and to make it more palatable to drive those intakes. So we're up at 4.5 kilos of purchase feed to get this silage doing a kilo of live weight gain a day for a 400 kilo animal. If you look at your average, your low protein, if you just go back. So if you look along the list, you'll see it kind of ends the cost of production, cost of all feeds on a live weight gain model perspective. You can see that when you go right over to the end, your target silage analysis, you've got your highest daily live weight gain is achievable based off this silage. You've got your lowest cost per day is on this silage as well. And crucially, because you've got highest potential daily live weight gain and your lowest feed cost, you therefore then have your lowest cost per kilo live weight gain. So on that, the cost of that benefit of that good silage compared to your higher dry matters or your lower protein silages can be upwards of 30p per kilo live weight gain, which is a substantial amount of money over the lifetime of that animal. If you go to the summary section at the end there, we just chat through a few of the little key points. So again, I will always harp on about the 3 pillars to maintaining animals' performance. If we're changing their environment, we do not change their diet or their social group. If we're changing their social group, we do not change their diet and we do not change their environment. And if we're changing their diet, we don't change their social group or their environment. So it's very much a simple thing. The calves first arrive, don't change their diet and don't mix them into different batches. It'll mean that we'll be able to drive intakes as much as possible. Once they've settled into their environment and are comfortable and healthy, that allows us to begin the process of changing the diet. But we don't want to make changes too quick. We want to do it gradually over a month to 6 week period to really help those animals cope and to drive performance on. As I said, this is the most efficient time for these calves on farm. So we want to maximize the daily live weight gain we're getting through this period. Driving intakes is key. Any restrictions on their intakes can limit performance. This is both in respect of silage that is too high in dry matter can limit their intakes because they physically won't want to eat enough. It's too dry, it's not as palatable, and it's very hard for them to get enough into them. Equally, if the silage is too wet, we're going to struggle to get animals to actually be able to physically eat the amount of fresh weight required to get to that energy intake in a day. So when you're making your silages, it's all about aiming for that 28 to 35% dry matter to allow us to retain as many nutrients as possible in that silage while making a silage that is as high in terms of palatability as possible, and really focusing in on that intake factor in your silage analysis as much as possible. Getting your forage analysis tested regularly is absolutely vital. Getting one test done at the start of a winter, I would say, is not enough. It's a good starting point, but whether it's pits or it's bales, you're going to be making silage in different fields. You're going to be as you work your way through the pit, you're going to have different grasses and different from different fields. Not everyone's making the same one pit of silage all off one field on one day. Equally, if it's bales, you'll have multiple different cuts of bales coming through. So getting them tested. Most of your feed companies, if you're buying any feed off them, they will test your silage for free. If not, just let us know and we'll try and arrange to get your silage tested. But in and around the 6 weeks to 2 months mark is sort of ideal for getting your silage tested. If we're looking at reducing feed costs, the single biggest thing you can do to reduce feed costs is target daily live weight gain. Particularly at a young age, they're far more feed efficient. We want to maximize daily live weight gain. if we need to save on silage, the easiest way to save on silage is to get animals off farm sooner. You'll see from the figures that I put up, that having a higher daily live weight gain will have a reduction in your feed costs per kilo of live weight gain. At the end of the day, if you're a grower or a finisher, we're producing kilos of beef, not heads of animals. So it is all about how many kilos we're producing per kilo of feed that we're putting into them. Protein is our single biggest feed cost that we're probably going to buy in. It's relatively cheap, particularly this year, to buy energy. Barley is very cheap. So energy is generally not going to be our expensive thing. It never is going to be our most expensive thing. Protein will always be the most expensive. So what we want to try and do is to limit costs. We want to focus on producing as high a quality forage as possible, to produce as much homegrown protein as possible, to reduce those feed costs. And like all things, if you're buying protein, make sure you're buying high quality protein. So you're looking at rape meals, wheat and maize distillers, are your two high quality proteins. And more often than not, feed grade urea is an absolute no-no. So if you've got feed labels, if you want someone to look at them, have a look at your feed rep. If not, and we've spoken in the past, or if we haven't spoken in the past, get in touch with your Gamechanger BDM, pass them on your feed label. It'll make its way through to me. I can have a look at it and tell you yay or nay on whether it's good, what you need to do, and balance things up for you. So if there's any advice needed, just let us know. And that should be all of mine.
Thanks, Sean. Evening, everyone. For those that I haven't met, I think I may have liaised with a number of you either in person or on our success platform. Myself and Georgina are supporting the Gamechanger producers. So I'm Beth, and I'm an enterprise success manager here at AgriWebb. And following on from Hannah and Sean and their respective offerings tonight, I will spend the next few minutes giving a insight into AgriWebb and taking the time to showcase just a couple of features, namely weights and treatments that offer particular value to you as Gamechanger producers. So just to give a bit of an overview about AgriWebb, for those of you who may not be aware, ultimately AgriWebb is a pivotal tool for you all, which allows you to capture the records that we've spoken about here, namely around feed, weight and treatments, all of which are the key criteria that are intrinsic to being part of the Gamechanger scheme. So an insight into AgriWebb itself, we're known to be transforming global cattle and sheep production with livestock management software, and our goals are around delivering profitability, provenance and sustainability right across the supply chain. So as you can see on the photo here, just to give a snippet, we're a software that's composed of both a web component and a mobile app. And ultimately, we facilitate the record capturing of day-to-day data across your farming enterprise. So those records include feed, weight, treatments, costs of production, all of the things that are key for compliance and overall business visibility. So when we refer to the Gamechanger and AgriWebb goals as such, and those that are intrinsic to our partnership, these are those that we have set aside with the Gamechanger team. So ultimately, we're ensuring that the calf procurement and collection processes are run as smoothly as possible. So we want to simplify the usage for the procurement team and reduce inefficiencies and errors with the intake of animals, and obviously the assigning to rearers and finishers, of which I'm sure there are many of you tonight. Then obviously the rearing and finishing aspects themselves, we set ourselves apart from other software providers in allowing an ease for you to capture the data at the source. So as I said, the weights, the treatments, all of the things that are key for your day-to-day operations can be captured on AgriWebb. And overall, allowing you to build a full and holistic picture of an animal's lifetime. So again, AgriWebb serves as the component to allow you to have visibility from birth to kind of death or exit on farm. You have a visibility of the whole animal history and an insight into every kind of day-to-day activity that's taken place within its lifetime. All of those aspects then feed into the reporting and information. So all of the information that you capture in your AgriWebb accounts is relayed to the Gamechanger team. And so they have that overall visibility of treatments and weights and the kind of full insights from rearer to finisher across the supply chain. And obviously with that, presents a data opportunity for the business overall at Gamechanger to be able to have insights and value add to the data that's relayed to them. So again, here really this just simplifies all that I've spoken about, but AgriWebb itself is split into these three components. So we have the livestock element, which focuses specifically on your animals. So tying in genetics, fertility, health and nutrition we've spoken about tonight, and obviously weight and quality. Then we have like the pasture component. So you're able to make use of the grazing features, whether they have value or not within the software that you've got access to. You can map out your fields, have all of your pens, sheds, everything all set up within the software to allow you to have that visibility of their kind of grazing days and rotational plans if that's something of interest. Obviously, all of that feeds into your harvest and yield reports and ultimate cost of production. And then, as I said, the ultimate kind of underlying aspects being the business management side of things. So giving the biosecurity, ensuring that you've got the full red tractor adherence complied to. So you've got your audit and compliance all tick boxed. And you also can make decisions off any kind of like data aspects that you're capturing, as well as planning any like tasks and team management aspects. So ultimately, AgriWebb has been pioneered with the farmer in mind. So we focus on really simplifying how you capture that data. So it's allowing for you to simply add in data at ease. So as I said, within the mobile app or web app, so there's no compliance pain and an overall farm improvement of performance. And all of that, as I said, feeds into the Gamechanger reporting function. So to talk about two features then, I just have a high level overview into treatments and weights. So as Hannah's spoken about, obviously having a visibility of all of your animal welfare is critical. So AgriWebb allows you to keep a check on all of your inventory items. So as you can see here, you can track your livestock treatments in your mobile app, and you can identify animals that are requiring vaccinations. Every treatment that you create in AgriWebb can have a withholding period associated with it. So that you can keep a check on all of the treatments as they're being applied across the batches. And these can obviously be applied individually if you've got like one or several lame animals, or across the whole batch that you're needing to treat at the point of intake. And as I've said before, again, you can keep a hand on your kind of pasture treatments as well. And there's the same feed inventory as we've got for treatment. So you can see here on the snapshot, you've got livestock, feed and paddock treatments. So you can put in your silage, any other feeding items that you're wanting to give out to the batches as well. Keep a hand on cost and overall consumption as and when it's needed. So as these treatments are applied across batches, then these all in turn feed into our reports, as I said, which will become invaluable for you to cross-check across your batches, the performance of animals, and ultimately the cost of spend, and the kind of progression that you've got from rear to finish. So as you can see here, this is a snapshot of the reports. It gives you an overview of the amount of treatments applied to which animal and of how much. So again, you can come in here at any given time and customize the report with the detail that you're looking for, specific to the management group, specific to the treatment that's been applied or the time of year, etc. So you can get a full view of the details that you're needing from a kind of your compliance perspective. And then looking at weights then, so you may or may not know, but we are kind of conscious of evolving our product considerably at AgriWebb. So working in line with a number of producers, much like yourselves, we have enhanced the product considerably in the way that we allow you to capture weight data, particularly, as I said, being part of the Gamechanger scheme. I realise it's, some of the key requirements are being able to track your animal weight from intake to exit, and obviously understanding as and when they'll be ready to leave farm and at what age, etc. So we now have what we call our weight forecaster, and that ultimately enables you to plan more effectively for upcoming sales and key production events like joining. So you're able to use actual or average daily weight gains within this tool here, and it then forecasts for the data that make those decisions for you. So you can use it to forecast the weight gain for a group of livestock up to 3 months in advance, and you can compare them with the different livestock groups that you've got within your enterprises. So if we've got a moment, I do just have a video that we've got in here, as long as it will come across. May struggle, just bear with me 2 seconds. Sorry. I think I may struggle actually to show the weight forecaster video, but I'll send it across post the webinar with everybody for this evening, because I'm conscious of everyone's time. But ultimately, it gives you an overview of being able to select a batch within your enterprise and then predict their kind of exit date relative to the target of their kilo input that you've suggested within your setting of target weights. So I'll follow it with that. My apologies. I think within the slide, I can't access the link. It's embedded. But I don't know if anyone has any questions per se on any of those. I'm happy to answer them here now, or obviously at a later date.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Beth. And a big thank you to Hannah and Sean as well. If it's possible, Hannah and Sean, could you just come back a minute, just in case if we've got any questions? I've just seen one come through, and it's just one for you, Beth. Just in terms of if I need to have a look through that weight forecaster, is there a central platform for where I can find the videos? What can talk me through how to use it?
Yeah, gladly. I was just wanting to show that, sorry, my apologies. So we have within AgriWebb a dedicated academy for all Gamechanger resources. So within that, there's a dedicated help article for the weight forecaster, and that shows the video that I was referring to there, as well as a few more specifics on tips and tricks to utilize it. But again, all of you that are on the call tonight, I'm sure have access to AgriWebb as it is already, and so you've got that functionality and feature within the web app. So please play around with it and trial a few of the pointers I mentioned. And if you want to have a one-to-one or have any queries, reach out to us.
Brilliant. Thanks, Beth. And then we just got a question for you, Sean, around thoughts on fodder beet in diets.
So fodder beet is a great feed, but it does present some challenges as well. So it's just important to bear them in mind. Fodder beet in general is something that animals will eat over and above their own diet. So it is a relatively low dry matter, around 23 to 28% dry matter. If you give animals 20 kilos of their TMR to eat, and then you give them 5 or 6 kilos of fodder beet, they'll generally eat that 5 or 6 kilos of fodder beet plus their own allocation for the day. So it doesn't tend to save you an awful lot in terms of actual feed, but it does drive intakes, and it will drive extra energy into the animals. So it is really good in that respect. The challenges with fodder beet then is around the washing and chopping of it, and the animals you're going to feed it to. So with your fodder beet, if you're going to feed it to really young calves, it needs to be really clean and really finely chopped. If we're not able to do those sort of things, then it really only becomes for your last 100 days for your bigger finishing animals. The reason for that is, one is their ability to actually eat it and chew it. But as well as that, you've also got soil contamination, mycotoxins in that attached to that fodder beet. Young calves, again, you've got limited
I think we might have lost Sean for a minute or two.
Yeah, I think you're very cut there.
It's really in your finishing diet. It's really in your finishing diet and your last 100 days. But previous to that, I wouldn't see its value in a lot of other diets.
Brilliant, thanks, Sean. Sorry, I think you just broke up at the last minute, but we can follow any. It's all right. We can follow any if any more questions come up. We can follow that up. And then I've just got a last question for Hannah. Hannah, there's a question here just around if there's any. Have you seen any tools like monitors where you can get in sheds which can monitor things like that? Do you recommend anything you've seen?
Yeah, so there's quite a lot. There's quite a lot on the market now, lots of different ones. So we've used New Monitor, which some of you might have come across as a practice. So that just does your standard temperature, humidity, and also does ammonia now. It's had a recent update. And the idea with that is you like drill it into the wall of the shed at an animal level. So one of the key things with these things is that it's really easy to measure temperature and humidity and whatnot. There's loads of devices out there. You can even just get them off Amazon, for example, like I do for my medicines drawer in my truck. But making sure we put them at the level of an animal will tell us what is going on at the level of the animals. So the new monitor is really handy for that. But have a Google. There's loads out there. Obviously, there's things like detection things that go on animals now as well. Things like the Sense Hub tools. Whether that is cost effective, I think is a business by business decision. I would say certainly if you're having issues with like wastage or poor performance, it's definitely a tool you can look into, but there's probably some easier and cheaper wins out there to start with. But yeah, things like the new monitor or even just an Amazon one, or the best thing to do is go and have a conversation in your shed for 15 minutes and see how you feel.
Brilliant. Thanks, Hannah. Great. Just cautious of time. So thank you all so much. That's been really helpful. And I hope it's been helpful for everyone on this call as well. What we'll do is we'll circulate the recording to everyone on here so they've got that as a resource as well. But if there's any questions, please follow up with us and the team. We're more than happy to help and answer any questions anyone's got at a later date. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.